Hello again and welcome once more to the Better Learning Podcast. My name is Carl. As always, I am really grateful for you taking the time out of your busy day to join me and talk about the betterment of accessibility to learning and make lives better for our learners. So, here we go. Picking up from where we left off last time, we had some wonderful discussions, finally, about what the change of improved accessibility to learning might look like in your teaching, in your curriculum design, and your lesson plans. We also talked about the extent of the change that you might want to make, the amount of time, which is incredibly precious to us as practitioners in education, and the amount of resources we might want to direct in undertaking this change. And we're going to talk a bit more about that today. We are going to look at how to make the change in terms of culture, not just the knowledge that we need, but indeed the ability to make this change. So, without further ado, here we go. And first up, I would like to discuss with you the concept of critical friendships and just how amazing they are in not just supporting you as you undertake this challenge, but stretching you that little bit further. And it's that point of critical reflection that is maybe from a third party. You know, we're all very familiar with reflective practice and analysing perhaps the impacts our teaching practice has. But this is like another aspect of that, and it's particularly relevant in terms of change. So I think the best way to sum up what a critical friendship is if we consider friendship in any context as a safe space in which we are appreciated and understood no matter what. That's a very safe space. But if we were to stretch that further, if we were to say critical friendship is a brave space where, yes, we are seen and understood on a humanistic level, but at the same time, we are challenged, directed, we're set targets. Maybe there's some performance demands or something task focused. That's a lot closer to what critical friendship is. Now, while it's true that the critical part of critical friendship is very much trying to get more performance out of you, and more results, maybe even more risks. We're definitely going to talk about risks today. There's also the supportive aspect, which aligns itself, both camps, both the supportive part and the challenge part, the critical part and the friendship part, it all aligns very much with coaching, actually. If you're fortunate enough to have experienced or even been trained in coaching and mentoring, it's very much aligned with that in terms of its goals, and even some of the models are very relevant. So if you're aware of that, I would definitely lean into that knowledge base. Now, in choosing, or perhaps even targeting, if that's an appropriate phrase, in highlighting your potential critical friend, it's obviously quite important that you find yourself someone that is in some way an ally or aligned with the principles of our change, with the idea that we're going to better the experience of our learners through accessibility to learning and better the outcomes professionally for ourselves as well, it has to be said. It's very important that you find someone who is aligned with that, maybe even shares that goal. That's not a bad thing either, but someone who can be very objective and someone you trust to Tell you the things that maybe you need to hear but you're not ready to hear, but tell you in such a way that you are still feeling that you're listened to and seen and understood, while at the same time someone is demanding better of you in a supportive way. That's really important. And that's very much the idea behind critical friendship. It's not to break you down and tell you that you can't do something. It's about challenging you to do better and do more and find ways to do the things that you think maybe you can't do. So that's one of the great joys of critical friendships. It does make you a better practitioner in whatever field you work in. So I highly encourage you, when rolling this change out long term, that you engage with and seek out a critical friend. And with that in mind, actually, in a similar vein, I think it's really important that you engage with your line manager or quality manager or some kind of training staff, someone who has a role within the CPD structure of your organization, and engage with them. Let them know what is going on, have that conversation. Even if you are the one to consistently initialize that conversation and keep it going, please do, because it's really, really important that we don't do this alone. And you may well find yourself with a fantastic ally. You may find yourself in greater esteem within your organization because you're taking on this initiative, you're keeping this conversation going, and you're pushing yourself to meet the needs of your learners. And this whole situation with the needs of learners may not be apparent to individuals. They may know about it, but they may not understand its significance. And it's hugely significant. And if you are the one to bring that to their attention whilst dealing with it, then that reflects fantastically on you. So ideally, if you can find a critical friendship that is perhaps within the management structure or the training or quality structure of your organization, that's 2 wins in one. And it's certainly a lot easier on your time and your resources. And moving on now from critical friendships, this may be quite obvious, but it's something we don't do often enough, I feel. Drawing on our previous training. Now, that could be at any point in our careers. It's a wonderful opportunity to revisit ideas that we've had that maybe we've shied away from, or we've simply gotten too busy to enact. Or perhaps, whatever the barrier is, now is a wonderful time to revisit old training, old materials, even right back from your initial teacher training. One really cool example actually was I delivered a micro teach over the summer for a module at university, and it was part of a team teach, and I was fortunate enough to have these really wonderful individuals to work with, but we were quite stuck negotiating the middle ground between the three of us. So I drew on my initial teacher training, where as part of my placement there was a lot of team teaching to begin with, as you might expect. But also I was able to draw on some of the materials, and so we set active learning as a theme for the whole micro teach, and that worked really well. But of course it wouldn't have done that if I hadn't had the presence of mind to stop and think back on all the training, things that not that I hadn't done, but I hadn't done in a while. So it's really good to revisit that, and again, as part of your reflective practice, that reflective cycle, to go back, bring old ideas forward with a fresh set of experiences and see what the changes are. It's really cool. I'm really enthusiastic about that. Also, I feel it's really important. I know I keep mentioning it, but your core values go back to why you got into teaching in the first place. Um, I realise as the years go by with our careers, we build up a sort of a healthy cynicism, if you could call it that. But ask yourself why you got into teaching in the first place and bring that idea forward. Because I'm sure it hasn't changed. How we teach might change, the learners might change, the policies might change, but those core values are still there. And I encourage you to reconnect with those and find once more what is really important to you. In the same way that enacting this change, doing this podcast, doing this module at university has been based upon some really important values to me and my exploration of them. So I definitely advocate for that. I'm a great example of the power of that. Someone who is quite shy and at times withdrawn is suddenly a thought leader, I suppose you'd say. Moving away now from something that's maybe a bit inward facing, and I appreciate not everyone is comfortable with that sort of holistic work. I'd like to talk now about communities of practice. Now, this is something I'm sure we've all come across, even if we haven't heard it termed in this way. So, a community of practice can be defined as a group of people coming together with a common goal, a common practice, some kind of commonality. And the purpose of meeting, the purpose of that community is in order to move forward and face issues, challenges, and find opportunities. And I've no doubt that regardless of your setting, whether you're in FE, secondary, or higher education, even, there is a community of practice in the sense that there's often training sessions. Even if they're led by a few individuals, you're absolutely already part of a community of practice in a professional sense. But what I would like to suggest is finding others that share your goal. Similar to the critical friendship, but without the coaching, because you're not going to coach and challenge everyone on that scale, because it's frankly it's not safe. So this is very much coming together and offering up experiences. In fact, it's quite similar to action learning sets. If you've ever come across that before, that's a very cool solutions focused forum in which people offer up scenarios, real or otherwise, and the group comes together to explore the mechanics of it, the background of it, the solutions to it. And that's a really positive environment to be in. And I really encourage you to engage with action learning sets as a mode perhaps to communities of practice, because it's really powerful. And if you were to find other individuals excuse me, within your organization that have that common goal, either as a personal value or within their professional role, that's really powerful. And sharing that and exploring that and finding solutions to enable yourself to move towards this goal of better accessibility to learning, it is really powerful. It's really galvanizing. It's inspiring, actually. It does inspire you to do better. So I would really encourage you to engage with or even form a community of practice. It's really important. Now, you might notice so far that the majority of these means to allow you to enable this change and to see it propagate within your organization have very much been people based. I'm definitely not expecting you to do this alone. I'm certainly not doing this alone. I've got all manner of support and discourses going on with some fantastic individuals who I'm very thankful for. But there is a lot of work to be done on a singular level. And so, with that in mind, I encourage you to look at resources in your own time and explore your strengths as a teacher, as a lecturer, as some kind of instructor or coach, perhaps, and find resources that inspire you, that make you want to do things differently or make you think differently about teaching. Now, I can't tell you what those are because it's a very personal thing when you're exploring your own practice and the motivations behind this. I mean, if we're talking about accessibility to learning, which we are, I highly encourage you to research universal design for learning, which is the basis for what we're discussing here. There's also some wonderful books out there. One in particular is a favourite of mine. I'm dipping in and out of at the moment. Is by Werner Rossi. It's called Inclusive Learning Design in Higher Education. It is partially the basis for some of the research I've done for this podcast. It's also forming a backbone for the research for my dissertation, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to, by the way. So it's really important to have these resources that inspire you, that challenge you, that make you think. Because yes, we have to draw on a community to enable us to move forward with this change. We certainly can't do it alone. But at the same time, I appreciate there is some singular work, and some of us do like to work alone. And if I didn't acknowledge that, then I wouldn't be making this change accessible to you. And how ironic would that be? Espousing a change for accessibility to learning, but not making accessible to all styles of working. And finally, the final point of discussion in finding ways to make you able to enact the change of exploring greater accessibility to learning, I would like to talk about your appetite for risk. Now, up until this point, we've talked a lot about the holistic ability and means to accessing and making this change a reality. We talked about co-construction and introspect. Risk appetite and risk tolerant are very different. It's part of leadership and that set of semantics, and partly in coaching as well, life coaching, professional coaching, that sort of thing. It's a really powerful tool to, again, reflect on how you're changing your practice, how you're developing your practice. And as a side note, it's really powerful in your personal life as well. So to put this in the context of your teaching practice, your lecturing, your curricular design, risk appetite is the general level of risk that you accept. So every year we all go through this. We look at our teaching materials and we tweak it. We update it. We make small changes. We make sure the information is up to date and any case studies or examples are relevant. That's quite a small risk appetite. There's nothing that we've really changed there. And we all do it. We all do it. It's part of our job. We're not looking to, change the world in that respect. And this is because if we don't have any evidence, or we don't seek out any evidence that there is a deficiency perhaps in our designs for learning, then we're not going to act on them. We're not going to actively seek it out and make work for ourselves. But this is where risk tolerance comes in. This is where, again, we're moving from a safe space to a brave space. And we start taking what perhaps you might perceive as a risk. You start trying something new with your curriculum, with your lesson plans, with your means of accessibility. Now, these could be some fairly minimal risks. In the case of drawing on the previous episode where we talked about dual coding, that's a very technical challenge in that it draws on your existing knowledge base, pairing one set of stimuli with another stimuli. In existing curriculum, it's still a risk, but it's still quite minimal. But again, drawing on the previous episode, if we think about project-based learning, again, that could be quite a minimal risk, or it could be quite big. It could be quite an adaptive challenge, which is kind of why I left it quite open-ended, in that you could take as much risk with that as you could tolerate. And by tolerance, I do mean it's a very personal thing. If you're not comfortable throwing away your curriculum and starting again, then absolutely don't do it. I'm not here to tell you or prescribe to you any massive fundamental changes. It's up to you how much you do, but do something. Now, I'm very well aware that the moment you heard me say the word risk, doesn't matter that I was talking about risk tolerance or risk appetite. The only word you focused on there was risk, and you thought the worst. It's quite a triggering word, and that's fine. It was exactly the same for me when I first learned about risk appetite and being brave and putting yourself out there a little bit. But that implies in some way that doing something new is dangerous. It presents a risk to us professionally and to our practice. But actually, sometimes doing the same thing is more damaging. When I taught in further education, I loved to join my students in their ensembles and play guitar with them and make very real and tangible the lessons that I was teaching them. And that worked really well. It was very much me modelling, the kind of musician I wanted my performers to be. And I was really proud of that. When I left FE and went into supply teaching, it was obviously very different. But I was struggling with a particular group of secondary school students in one placement. And it was suggested to me that I bring my guitar in. And I thought, yes, what a great idea. It's going to be exactly like it was before. I'll model the kind of musician and the kind of student that I would like them to be. And it didn't work. Because I repeated the same actions with a complete lack of risk. And that's where I fell down. Because I didn't think about it, I didn't diagnose what was going on. So actually the risk there was in doing nothing but the same thing. So if you're stuck on the word risk and that's becoming a barrier to you, then think perhaps for a moment how much of a risk is posed by doing the same thing over and over with different groups, with different profiles, and expecting the same results. So I really do encourage you to reflect on the appetite for risk that you have and think, how much of a risk am I comfortable taking? How different am I comfortable in making my lesson plans, my curriculum design, and my resources in terms of inclusivity, in terms of access to learning? Because it's a really powerful tool once you start to learn that actually it's not as dangerous. Risk doesn't mean danger. it very much means that there is an unknown element at play. And where there is the unknown, there's absolutely opportunity for us to grow, build new understanding, and expand our cognitive template as practitioners. And so, to wrap up today's episode of the Better Learning Podcast, I've included some resources in the description that were used to research and inform this episode. As always, I am so thankful for you taking the time to join me here on the Better Learning Podcast. I can't wait to hear about the changes that you are enacting in your organisation and how you are bettering the educational experience for your learners.